Being a defendant is relatively new business for 19-year-old Amy, who's on trial here in Northampton District Court for disorderly conduct. But it's old business for 50-year-old Abbie Hoffman, this time charged with simple trespassing, and teamed up once again with a Chicago 7 defense lawyer, Leonard Weinglass. As Abbie, Amy, and the 13 other defendants came into court this morning, 6 jurors were in the jury box. But in another hour of shuffling, the box was clear again, emptied by the prosecution, which challenged every one of the jurors tentatively selected yesterday. Amy, the main media draw for this one, drew rings on her fingers and squiggles on paper. Abbie, who's representing himself, looks his age, a now sober version of his 60s self. No somersaults for this one. He says the times have changed.
Now I think that the majority of people in Northampton and Massachusetts, that's what we're counting on anyway, by going to the jury trial, feel that the CIA has been acting not in the best interest of the United States, what with Iran Gate and sneaking around Congress to give money to the Contras, et cetera, et cetera.
The defendants don't dispute the prosecution's charges that on November 24th of last year, they occupied a building on the University of Massachusetts campus to protest CIA recruitment, and that they refused to leave when ordered. But Carter and her fellow defendants claim they had to commit these minor crimes to stop the CIA from committing far greater crimes.
And in our case, we intend to show that the harm they were seeking to avoid is a harm that includes murder, kidnap, rape, violations of international law. And so we think once a jury is able to weigh whether or not the students went too far or the CIA went too far, they'll have no trouble in finding that it was the CIA that's gone too far.
To back their necessity defense, Amy, Abbie, and all have enlisted the likes of Daniel Ellsberg, who wrote and released the Pentagon Papers.
I felt that power on my own life, so I can testify directly to that. Actions by other defendants, exactly like the ones on trial, the same age, the same motives, put the question in my mind when I was a former official and a current consultant to the Defense Department. Am I doing what I should be doing to stop such crimes? What could I do to help end the Vietnam War if I were willing to go to jail, as these people were, and as the people here on trial today may have to do?
Elevating the misdemeanor case to a political trial of the CIA, the defense has also called on Ralph McGehee, one-time head of the Dirty Tricks Department.
I hope that this trial will show that the corporate operations of the agency have been disastrous for the American people, not only via Contragate, which is a CIA operation from the very beginning, but historically since its creation in 1948.
If and when a jury is finally selected tomorrow, the defense plans to call a veritable who's who of the left to the stand. Ellsberg, Daniel Berrigan, Ramsey Clark, ex-CIA dissidents, and even a former Contra chief. Of course, if the defendants want to put the CIA on trial here, they need an audience. And so far they have one, even if the big question, especially among photographers, is, have you seen her? Where's Amy? For the 10 o'clock news, I'm David Boeri. Day 3, and still no jury for Abbie, Amy, and their 13 nearly anonymous co-defendants who photographers consider obstructions for their main assignment, the former president's daughter. The court brought in a fresh supply of recruits this morning in its slogging search for 6 jurors acceptable to both sides. Yesterday, the court ran out of warm bodies. Well over 100 potential jurors have been challenged or otherwise excused so far. And today was a replay. They came and then they went, sworn in, questioned, singled out, and then set free. As the call went out for more, the court recessed, and photographers and cameramen had another opportunity to shoot Amy. Amy smoking, Amy drinking Coke, Amy with friends, just another teenager in dyed hair, shy and politely declining interviews. She'll take the stand in her own defense, which should bring us reporters in like flies.
Lisa M. Sheedy, Amy L. Carter, Roger E. Boeri.
The judge looked concerned as his pool of jurors dried up under examination and challenge of defense and prosecution. And when the bench was empty once more, called a recess, ran out of patience, and punctuated the session with an exclamation mark.
There's no more jury pool downstairs, so they'd have to go over to Woolworth's to get. This is what they do here.
So how can a simple misdemeanor case with charges of disorderly conduct and trespassing take 3 full days of jury selection?
I don't think they would have taken this long time going over this jury with a fine-tooth comb if this was just a simple trespassing case. And we believe this is not a simple trespassing case, that this is the most significant hearing of the CIA, public hearing, since the Church Committee's hearings in 1976.
The experts are here. Some of them have been speaking all week. They've been meeting with the defendants, and all the experts have said they'll rearrange their schedules and they'll come back.
They're not frustrated?
They're not frustrated. They know that democracy takes time and the truth will eventually come out.
The defense has raised $15,000 and needs more. Hoffman gave the pitch today. Some suggest he may have stayed too long in the spotlight. Well, has your time come and gone?
Well, what do you mean by that? That I'm too old to cut the mustard?
Well, vicious rabbit.
Well, are you?
I think I got about 25 more years in me. One of these days I'll get a trial right.
Tomorrow, reporters here hope the agonizingly slow process of jury selection will finally end and opening arguments will begin. And once that happens, this trial could become very interesting because the defense promises that at least two of its witnesses, former Contra leader Edgar Chamorro and ex-CIA dissident Ralph McGehee, will be making major front-page revelations about the Central Intelligence Agency. For the 10 o'clock news, I'm David Boeri.
According to the evidence, so help you God. Please be seated.
4 days into the trial, both sides finally agreed on 8 jurors, 2 of them alternates, who will determine the guilt or innocence of Amy Abbie and company. Assistant DA Diane Fernald opened and closed the prosecution's case in less than 3 hours. She said that what happened the night of November 24th was a simple case of trespassing and disorderly conduct. Hoffman and 11 others are charged with occupying a university building and refusing orders to leave. Carter is one of 3 defendants charged with trying to block a bus that was taking arrested protesters to jail.
This complaint alleges on the 24th day of November, 1986, at Amherst, they were a disorderly person.
I would ask you, ladies and gentlemen, to keep in mind what the issues are in this trial.
The evidence, she said, would prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the protesters did trespass and were disorderly. But defense lawyer Leonard Weinglass said the students and activists had a right and a purpose to do what they did.
Was this lawlessness on the part of these defendants? Or was this an act to stop the lawlessness? That's essentially the question.
Weinglass said that just like going into a neighbor's yard to stop a fire is not trespass, acting to stop the CIA from killing in covert operations was not a crime either.
Given the sad spectacle, the only crime that could conceivably be committed when the CIA came to the University of Massachusetts to recruit still others to engage in this activity would have been a crime of silence and indifference.
In a second opening argument, defendant and UMass student Jennifer Johnston said the university itself broke the law by allowing CIA recruiters on campus.
If a university is made aware that a certain organization is committing crimes and atrocities against human rights, and then they continue to extend those resources to that organization, they are in fact helping that organization commit those crimes.
Judge Richard Conan has allowed the defense to call witnesses to testify about those crimes, but has not yet ruled whether jurors can consider the testimony when deciding a verdict. For the 10 o'clock news, I'm David Boeri. The turning point perhaps came this morning when Judge Richard Conan ruled the jury could consider testimony that the defendants had to commit minor crimes in order to prevent major ones by the CIA. In closing arguments, the defense turned prosecution. The threat, said lead attorney Leonard Weinglass, was clear and imminent. People were dying because of the CIA, and the students had to take a stand.
It's not just a defense of necessity. Their actions were not only necessary, their actions were needed, their actions were essential, and those actions were effective.
Nervous and reading from script, Abbie Hoffman called himself the oldest student defendant.
I ask you, is it we, the defendants, who are operating outside the system? Or has what you have heard about CIA activities in Nicaragua and elsewhere meant it is they who have strayed outside the limits of democracy and law.
Prosecutor Diane Fernald has all along said this was a simple case, trespassing and disorderly conduct. Don't be convinced this is a CIA trial, she told the jurors. And at least Hoffman thought she had scored when the 6 jurors came back unsmiling only 2 hours later. He gave the thumbs down sign and braced for a conviction.
Will the following defendants please stand and face the jury?
Chomping Gum Amy and the other defendants stood while 15 envelopes were opened up.
What say you, Madam Forelady? Is the defendant, Raymond J. Allain, guilty or not guilty of the alleged complaint of trespassing?
Not guilty.
The first verdict was a tip-off in this joint defense, and the celebration began outside as the judge ordered the courtroom cleared of spectators. Back inside, the verdicts were all the same.
What say you, Madam Forelady? Is the defendant guilty or not guilty of the alleged complaint of disorderly person?
Not guilty.
Madam Forelady.
Dismissing the charges, Judge Conan turned the lights out on the prosecution's case. The defendants reveled outside.
The case was not defended. This case was prosecuted.
I'm proud to be here, proud to be an American. It's good for the country, good for democracy, good for business in Northampton. This courthouse will be remembered for 20 years now. This is where the CIA got whacked.
This means that people can find the CIA guilty, and it has an effect, like getting all these people on the street and getting them working.
Back. Thanks, Red. Good luck, Celtics. They're going to need the luck.
Do you think you convicted the CIA here today?
We absolutely convicted the CIA here today. There's no question about that. They could not have reached a verdict of not guilty without finding the CIA was guilty of illegal acts.
Has there been a conviction of the CIA here?
I think there's probably a lot of feeling around that that's the case.
Here in the CIA on trial locker room, the now former defendants say their next step is the march on CIA headquarters in Langley, Virginia, April 25th through 27th. And Amy Abbie and company say they'll all take part in a day of civil disobedience on the 27th. After all, they're on a roll now. For the 10 o'clock news, I'm David Boeri.